All right. So, continuing my little poetry slam, um, I have three more short videos to help me practice. One of them, so I know that at AUW, right outside the library, there is a quote from Kahil Gibran about education. And I can't remember exactly what the quote is, but it was, you know, it was it was great. And it was exactly like my own philosophy and my favorite documents here. The other thing I wanted to say is that I actually printed these out on fancy paper. And so you can, at the end of the class or some point, you can pick your favorite of the four. And if you're at Lion, I'll put it in your mailbox. And if you're at AUW, I'll try to remember to bring them the next time I come, which who knows when that will be. But I really do believe we'll all be together at some point. So this one is about talking. And it is about what iPhones and technology does to us, that I do want to emphasize that the kind of wisdom and reflection that I'm encouraging is exactly the opposite of what your phone tries to get you to do. It's constantly distracting you, right? And so there have been studies of the brain done about the effect of such an emphasis on what's immediate. And there is another part of the brain close to the brain stem. It's called the white matter, and it's not developing. You know, the scans are showing that it's either not forming or it's disintegrating. It's decreasing in size. So yeah, this class is really about that white matter, that reflective consciousness that is tied to the brain stem, to our most primitive instinctual drives. And that's why these stories of the in mythology are about people, well, they're gods, but they're possessed. And so they trigger your understanding that you're capable of those deep, pretty primitive instinctual drives. The two most powerful are sex and aggression, and they're driven by pleasure and fear. And so we have to, and we get attached to them fantasies and phobias. So we have to, it's it's serious stuff. And the psychologists and scientists and all that figure it out, but they don't figure out that mythology actually is trying to address it. Those ancient traditions actually understood this. But these little poems are about talking when people spend too much time just chattering and it's mindless and they aren't being reflective enough. So this is Kahil Gibran. And then a scholar said, "Speak of talking." And he answered, saying, "You talk when you cease to be at peace with your thoughts, and when you can no longer dwell in the solitude of your heart. You live in your lips, and sound is a diversion and a pastime. And in much of your talking, thinking is half murdered, for thought is a bird of space that in a cage of words may indeed unfold its wings, but cannot fly." So the idea there is to have a free imagination. There are those among you who seek the talkative through fear of being alone. The silence of aloneness reveals to their eyes their naked selves, and they would escape. And there are those who talk, and without knowledge or forethought, reveal a truth which they themselves do not understand. And there are those who have the truth within them, but they tell it not in words. In the bosom of such as these, the spirit dwells in rhythmic silence. When you meet your friend on the roadside or in the marketplace, let the spirit in you move your lips and direct your tongue, Let the voice within your voice speak to the ear of his ear. For his soul will keep the truth of your heart as the taste of the wine is remembered, when the color is forgotten and the vessel is no more. So the idea here is that when you have a long-term friend and you know that you're like-minded and you've had conversations before and you've had life experiences before and you know that you love them and trust them, you don't really have to talk that much anymore. So in this class, we're just getting to know each other. So, but it is important not to chatter all the time. And don't necessarily take my advice. Okay, then there are a couple more that are related to that. This one is by Hannah Arendt, who was a very well-known philosopher. She wrote a book called The Human Condition, and she's famous for a chapter in that about the banality of evil. So she talked about the people who led Hitler's Holocaust. Arendt was Jewish, and she lived in Germany, and she escaped to the US, or she got out early. And so she talks about how these people appear to be just normal, everyday people, and they write home to their wives, and it's just scary how easily people can fall into evil. So we hope for the best. When we go through a disruption like COVID, we can come out much better off with a real conviction to work together, or we can come away from it afraid and much more adversarial toward each other. So we really have to make choices about that. But anyway, this is Hannah Arendt in an essay about understanding. Understanding is an unending activity by which, in constant change and variation, we come to terms with and reconcile ourselves to reality, that is, try to be at home in the world. What is important for me is to understand. For me, writing is a matter of seeking this understanding, part of the process of understanding. If you ask me about the effect of my work on others, if I may wax ironical, that is a very masculine question. Men always want to be terribly influential, but I see that as somewhat external. Do I imagine myself being influential? No. I want to understand. And if others understand in the same sense as I have understood, that gives me a sense of satisfaction, like feeling at home. So I will say that I have written 16 books and 50 plus articles, and nobody reads them as far as I know. I haven't made any money, but that's okay, because I know that I understand the things that I wanted to understand, and maybe somebody will care about it, but I have to let that go. And the only question for me is if there was something else I could have done better than that. And the thing that always kept me going was I thought, well, anything else I do, other people can do, and they can do it better. But I think this is the only thing I can do that I think makes a contribution to posterity, even if nobody may listen. I can't control that. But I do still agree with myself. And some of it will be some of my stuff. Mostly I just teach the stuff that I learned from, because I want to be a mediator between great minds, great literature, great ideas, and young minds, right? I just want to be the mediator. I don't want to get in the middle of that. And here's one more quote, poem, I don't know what you call it, little essay by Rainier Rilke. Be patient with all that is unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Do not seek for the answers that cannot be given, for you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now, and perhaps without knowing it, you will live along someday into the answers. So I think right now in your life, you have a lot of questions, about your future, the future of your country, the future of the climate. But I do think you have to just learn to love the questions, and always the question, well, what's the best contribution I can make? That's the question, right? You can't control what's actually happening, but you can control your response to what's happening. And so that can change every day. Just keep asking that question. And I think then you will create a good life for yourself. And be self-correcting, right? You make mistake, you figure out the mistake, you try not to make it again, or in my case, you try not to make the same mistake like more than 4 times. There should be a limit on how many times you can make the same mistake, but be patient with yourself, really. And I will be patient with you, certainly.